A fantastic new season is upon us in Marvel Snap, and Mr. Fantastic First Steps is living up to his name. This is a phenomenal new metagame powerhouse that can shoved into a variety of existing decks to make them stronger. Let's go ahead and dive on into everything that you can be doing with the new cards, as well as old favorites that are still finding success as people are laddering back up to infinite here in July. Mr. Fantastic feels like he is providing a key redundancy option for any deck that was previously interested in playing Surge. A 2 energy card that makes future cards that you are playing cheaper, allowing you to get solid cube equity with your opponent not quite knowing your output range, as well as making your things occasionally bigger in terms of stats. My personal favorite deck in Marvel Snap Bounce is one that loved Surge and it loves Mr. Fantastic as an additional tool to take advantage of. Anytime you reduce the cost of any of our 5 1 energy cards from 1 down to 0, we get to cash in on that discount multiple times over the course of the game as we bounce these cards to and from the board with Toxin, Falcon, and Beast. This makes it even easier for Sage and Hitmonkey to slam down on the final turn of the game, along with a flourish of ones, giving us big stats spread out across the board in a way that's going to be very difficult for our opponents to keep up with. At this point, I think Bounce is actually a pretty budget-friendly deck. Sage and Hitmonkey can both be swapped out for other 3 energy scaling cards such as Bishop or even Collector that gets bigger as the game plays out. Surge and Mr. Fantastic can swap for something like Black Swan that gives you an additional way to make your cards cheaper, and things like Silver Sable and even Nico Minaru can be subbed out for other 1 energy plays that are either disruptive like Iceman or scaling up in terms of stats like Hawkeye. Another one of my personal favorites that absolutely loves the addition of our new Mr. Fantastic is this Moon Girl Kahori deck. Previously, this deck list had been playing a copy of Zabu for just 2 4 energy cards since it was so incredibly powerful anytime we discounted either Moon Girl or Kahori. Mr. Fantastic allows us to drop this kind of narrow option, allowing us to discount things like Victoria Hand or Prodigy before duplicating them with Moon Girl to great effect. This deck list is really phenomenal at spreading points out evenly across the board, and thanks to Victoria Hand as well as Kahori, it's stellar at sneaking additional points into locations that you've already filled up earlier in the game, often catching your opponents off guard for solid cube equity. Snowguard kind of ties the entire room together, being something that generates 2 cards for Collector, gets discounted by Quinjet, powered up by Victoria Hand, and provides key counterplay to things like opposing copies of Limbo and smoothing out general location variants, making our deck more consistent overall. Unfortunately, in the opposite vein of Bounce, this deck list is not particularly budget friendly. Most of the higher series cards we're playing here have very niche specific roles that other things in Snap just are unable to cover for you. Second to one of the longtime sponsors I have here for my content, Flexispot. Not only do they make the chair you see me sitting in every day while I'm making content and my awesome standing desk, but they also make a range of other fantastic stuff for your home. They recently sent me their Flexispot Lotus recliner, and it is a chair that my entire family loves, with a spacious 20.9-inch wide seat with a 9.8-inch armrest on each side. You've got a space that not only you, but kids and pets and anybody else that wants to be involved can sit in, up to a 350-pound weight limit. It's also an incredibly flexible chair from Flexispot, having reclining positions and able to even spin in a 360-degree circle, which is definitely one of my kids' absolutely favorite features about this. Whether they're reading a book or playing a game or watching a show, you'll always see them rock it back and forth and spin it all around with whatever they are looking to do. It also has a fantastic little storage compartment on the left-hand side where you can store a remote so it doesn't get lost, or keep a handy snack for whenever you need that. The Lotus Recliner comes in an incredible range of colors. They have linen options in beige, light gray, and orange, as well as PU leather in form of slate blue, creamy ivory, and sunset brown. If you want a fantastic way to support my content while also picking up some fantastic equipment, be sure to check out my link to Flexispot, including this Lotus recliner in the video description down below. You can also use my code Lotus30 to get $30 off plus free shipping. One of my favorite mantras is you should always spend your money where you spend your time. We all spend a ton of time in the equipment that we sit in every single day, so let Flexispot help you upgrade some of yours. Our next Surge deck that absolutely loves Mr. Fantastic First Steps as an additional source of acceleration redundancy is this Sarah Infinity Ultron Agamotto mashup. Sarah and Infinity Ultron are both solid 5 energy cards. Absolutely love being played out a turn earlier. In addition to Surge and Mr. Fantastic, we also have Luna Snow as an additional way to drop these 5 energy plays a turn early. Agamotto kind of ties the room together, both being an additional bomb for us to accelerate into in the mid game, while also providing us with a fourth option for getting energy out ahead of time. This deck list leverages Iron Patriot and Valentina as cards that we can play early on curve, while also being things that provide stats for us in the mid to late game. My last Jeff's pick today is a mashup of cards that I've really enjoyed that have a unique mixture together. Many of us recently added Sasquatch to our collections thanks to the solid gold bundle that popped up in the shop, and this deck is a solid excuse to use her. Mr. Fantastic First Steps works really well with Mysterio because if you land that +2 on it, the real Mysterio will be a 6 and your clones will be base 2. He can also power up Clea while in your hand, allowing you to generate those flames. And Herbie works in a few different ways here. Its Rock can be powered up by Marvel Boy while also discounting Mockingbird. Its plus power mode can trigger Clea, giving you another flames, and its extra energy can give you a bigger burst in those final turns of the game, catching your opponents off guard. We kick off our high potential category this week with a handful of decks that don't need any cards from our most recent season that are putting up really promising stats on the untapped tracker with people climbing. The first of these is a Moon Girl Pixie variation. That's one of my favorite ways to play Marvel Snap. The basic idea here is relatively straightforward. You're going to get one of the Hulks or the Infidauts in your hand, hopefully with a discounted rate thanks to Pixie shuffling them around, and then you're going to duplicate them with Moon Girl to slam big points on the final turn of the game in a way that's very difficult for your opponent to interact with. If you play in a way ensuring that you don't have priority, they can't Shang-Chi your threats, and since they just have big numbers on them, they can't even be blown away by something like Goliath. This deck list is also pretty budget friendly as well, with Pixie really being the only higher series card that's a must have. Red Hulk can be swapped out for a different stat stick like Magneto or even regular Hulk, and Luna Snow can substitute for anything else that gives you additional energy consistently, such as Hope Summers, Jennifer Kale, or even a copy of Psylocke. In a world full of people playing tiny value cards backed up by Mr. Fantastic and Surge, as well as potent tech cards, perhaps Hell is the good guy? Well, at the very least, she's an anti-hero in our current metagame. This deck list is a great way to get big stats onto the board in a way that's very unpredictable for your opponents. Remember, Hela can only bring back one card from each different energy costs now, but if she's grabbing a powerful 6-drop such as Odin, he can re-trigger her to get an additional one out after the fact, and if she revives something like a Ghost Rider, it can bring back 2 6s effectively over the course of the game. Lots of variations of this Hela deck have been putting up stats pretty consistently on Untapped for the last couple of seasons, and the start of this finds lots of people having success while climbing. If you're looking to break some opposing sandcastles while making an amusing one of your own, this Annihilus Werewolf by Night deck featuring Merlin as an additional way to clear out your copies of the Void as well as Hood while dancing your dog around the board is putting up some pretty solid metrics. This is the type of deck list that, generally speaking, doesn't have any polarizingly bad matchups in Marvel Snap, because not only do you put out solid numbers of your own, but in the matchups where your opponent might be going over the top of you, you've got Shang-Chi, Enchantress, as well as Shadow King to push anything your opponent might be doing firmly over. The Ancient One has been creeping up in more and more spots since her Tau spell had its cost reduced from 3 down to 2. This incredibly interesting Misery deck list caught my eye when I was scrolling for top performers on Untapped, and I really like a lot of the things that it's bringing to the table. While it's a Victoria Hand Frigga deck at its core, this is not the only thing that Tau is able to copy your ongoing effects of. Miss Marvel as well as Claw are both incredibly potent things to allow you to spread stats around the board. I really like that this deck list can hit your opponent in a couple different ways, and going into that final Tau turn, you're often going to leave your opponent guessing what exactly you're going to be doubling up, giving you really solid cube equity, I would wager. Ajax Hazmat had fallen out of being a top performer when Hazmat was nerfed back to 3 energy, but with Mr. Fantastic first steps in the mix now as an additional way to take their cards and make them cheaper, we see Ajax posting up really solid metrics as people are climbing back to Infinite this season. If you're someone that enjoys playing these Afflict style decks, it looks like our latest season pass card could be supercharging them once again. Our last type potential deck list in today's roundup is the one that Reddit warned you about, the Fantasticar, a 4/7 found exclusively currently in the Super Premium Pass until next month, is putting High Evolutionary back on the map. I was honestly skeptical during the spoiler season that Fantasticar would be good enough before we got other members of the Fantastic Four like Invisible Woman and Human Torch, but after playing variations of this deck, I have to say I've been really impressed with it. On top of its base 7 points of power, you regularly have 3 or even 4 end of turn effects on the board by the end of the game, letting it regularly punch up to 13 or even 15 points worth of power for its investment. I will say the big downside to a deck list like this is that you're all in on making your own stats to synergize with the Fantasticar, which makes it difficult for you to play tech cards to break what your opponent has going on. So while this deck list feels pretty reasonable against opposing people trying to break your stuff thanks to Kyera's protection, it does seem like it struggles a little bit with the more linear decks like Discard and Mr. Negative that can regularly go over the top of the numbers that it's producing. As we move into the top performing category, we have deck lists that have consistently put up solid metrics for a number of weeks in Marvel Snap, with Cerebro 2 currently being at the top of the packs for the ranks of people climbing back to Infinite. This archetype is incredibly disruptive, with Goose and Storm letting you dictate how your opponent's cards play out across the board, and then things like Luke Cage, Shadow King, and the recently nerfed Red Guardian down to 2 power, letting you interface more directly with things that are going on. Cerebro giving plus 3 points of power has really put the card back on the map in a big way, and this deck list has been punching solid stats ever since. Deck and Discard is still out here pumping out consistently good metrics. I think the big strength of this archetype is the fact that it tends to be resilient to a singular piece of disruption. You just have so many scaling threats between Meek, Morbius, Collector, and your namesake in deck, and that a single point being removed often isn't enough for your opponent to overcome what you're putting together. Mr. Negative remains the most efficient hyperlinear go over the top deck in Marvel Snap. That makes it an excellent choice for laddering. Remember, folks, you do not need to be staying in games where your Mr. Negative opponent snapped you and then played Jane Foster the Mighty Thor, fishing up a ton of powerful stuff. Mr. Fantastic joins the ranks of Surge, Galacta, Gwenpool, and Merlin in good card tech stuff mush with a small hand buff slash board buff sub theme utilizing Mr. Sinister and Brood to give you actual points spread out across the board when breaking your opponent's stuff directly isn't quite enough to get the job done. Finally, as always, there are a ton of different Silver Surfer variations putting up solid performances, and this is yet another deck that was previously playing Surge before this season that welcomes Mr. Fantastic as an additional means of more consistent energy acceleration. One of the big things he does for this deck is a single discount on any of your 3 drops in your hand means that you can play 2 3s out on the 5th turn of the game, which gives you significantly more stats on the board for Silver Surfer to be pumping up on that final turn. The more astute longtime Hoaglandia watchers will note there wasn't a most popular category in the roundup this week. Not only is that because we had so many different deck lists to review, but looking at the top performing decks for the most competitive slices climbing back to infinite on the Untapped tracker, there actually wasn't a single deck list that broke even a 5% play rate. While Marvel Snap has had its ups and downs like any live service game in terms of balance, it really feels like the Second Dinner team has hit their stride this year while giving us new and interesting cards like Mr. Fantastic First Steps that are competitive and playable without simultaneously wiping out everything that was existing competitive, giving us lots of choices to bring to the table for what we can find success with. As always, I would love to hear what deck lists you've been rocking it with in the comments down below. And if you want to see me playing a number of these deck lists, check out the links to my daily deck highlights channel, where there's sweet Marvel Snap decks being played from my live stream 7 days a week. Speaking of things down below, I like to give a shout out to my longtime sponsor, Flexispot, once again for supporting today's video. Whether you're looking for an office chair, a standing desk, or the awesome Lotus recliner like we showcased earlier, you can use my link down below to pick those up while also supporting my content that I make here every day. As always, I appreciate everybody that made it all the way through to the end of the video, and I hope your next snap pack is an excellent one.